This is the Vanguard Podcast. I'm Gavin.
And I'm Zac.
And we're your hosts today. And we've just been joined by Matt T., host of the Midwest Socialist Podcast and co-chair of Chicago DSA's Southside branch. And we just wanted to have him on the podcast today to discuss the DSA in light of some recent DSA victories across the country. Thanks so much for joining us today, Matt. How's it going?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's going well. It's unseasonably warm here, so trying to enjoy it. Kind of like the Biden victory, not sure how much to enjoy it, what it should be.
There's a cold front coming down the road.
Yeah, that's a very lame joke, and if you edit that out, that's not a bad thing. Right?
No, we're keeping it.
Well, that's a good segue into the first thing I really wanted to talk to you about, which was, recently in Chicago, we saw the march down the street, basically, that you guys were doing, the Chicago DSA marching down the street next to the Trump Tower, chanting "fuck Trump, fuck Biden too. They don't give a fuck about you." Someone who's pretty sickened by both the Republican and Democratic establishments. It was just kind of medicine for my ears, especially amid the recent torrent of over-the-top, insincere praise of the Biden-Harris ticket from liberals nationwide, kind of pretending that Biden and Harris represent this pinnacle of honor and decency and democracy and all that stuff. I just wanted to, play this first of all, just so our viewers can see what you guys were, chanting and marching in the streets of Chicago, and then just get your, reaction or hear about how you guys came up with that chant and what the reaction's been. But yeah, so there's the video. And like I said, that was kind of going around on Twitter the other day. I thought it was, just perfect.
Yeah. So Gavin, like you said, who came up with the chant?
That was very spontaneous. We just heard somebody start and we were like, fuck yeah, that's got not only a good beat, but it's got exactly the words that we're trying to say. So it was, I'll give that, spontaneity was the champion that time. Yeah.
Cool. I saw someone else, another group of activists, chanting the same thing similarly. I don't remember which city it was in, but, like I said, as someone who just thinks it's we need to really start pressuring the Democrats now and, not wait around, kind of like Obama style, fall back to sleep. I just think it was, a great choice of words to really express, that sure, we may be done with Trump, fuck Trump, but, Biden is not necessarily the savior. He's not going to come in and save everything. So what's the reaction been to that? Have you guys, got some, negative shit for that, or has most people been on board?
As far as things within the chapter, yeah, I mean, everybody's on this board, on board with this. Everybody feels the same way about this in the chapter. Thankfully, I'm going to say, as far as I know, I should be clarified there. I don't speak for everybody. Some people might be upset that we didn't endorse Biden, or anybody else that was running. But there is definitely a sentiment of we're not going to push to the left. We're like, if anything, if we're really going to engage with it, it's going to be a pull to the left. It's going to be a demand, and is that the only way that we're going to go about the next 4 years? Absolutely not. We're not only going to be sticking to electoralism. We're going to be doing a lot of work outside of that realm. But we're going in with the sense of they're not our friends anymore. We're not going in with kid gloves, and we're not going to go in with kind of this peacemaking offer. It's just there's no reason to do that anymore. So.
Yeah, 100%. Could you just expand upon some of those other strategies that you might be looking to, kind of post-electoral strategies?
Yeah, so I mean, Chicago and DSA in general, but Chicago really focuses a lot on building labor power and creating a lot more of a class-conscious working class, and having this labor-first mentality, helping with unions, organizing with unions. Last year, we saw Chicago Teachers Union, DSA tried to help CDSA, Chicago DSA. I'll try to jargon myself a little bit. Chicago DSA helped with CTU a lot, their teachers union. This year, there was also strikes with the Illinois Nurses Association and SEIU locally here that the DSA tried to be as helpful with as much as possible. So growing this presence within the labor movement, growing these relationships with the labor movement. Right now, a lot of that, does exist within the union movement, and it's a lot of union work. but helping expand this to people that might not be in unions, people, creating a really like working class mentality and a working class identity within Chicago.
Yeah, and recently, as I mentioned earlier, we've seen a pretty impressive swath of DSA victories across the country. Zac and I were just reflecting over here on the channel recently about how impressive the growth and results has been from the Democratic Socialists of America across the country. DSA won a few nights ago on election night. They won 28 out of 37 national races and 8 out of 9 major ballot initiatives, which were all written and organized by various chapters. And just for anyone, that's watching right now that may not be totally familiar with the Democratic Socialists of America, could you maybe just explain a tiny bit about what you guys do and how you go about affecting progressive change in your communities?
Yeah, so the DSA, to some extent, is a network of organizers. It's a group of people that you can call upon, and we work on organizing things and helping, create change or something like that. But at the core of a lot of it is education is still a big part of a lot of what we do. So, when writing up literature about defunding the police, when doing our socialist night schools, education is really central to a lot of that work. But further than that, it is this trying to be it is thrust upon itself the biggest leftist organization that the U.S. has seen in over 100 years, in a very, very long time, not just leftist, but socialist. So the idea of creating policy and working within reformist measures, electoralist measures to enact socialist change and create a more and equal and fair, just democracy and just society is something that we're all really working on. So that could go as far as DSA members wanting to run, they get the endorsement of their chapters or the organization, and then to helping. I know that I can't remember which city right now, but like even helping write the policy or writing the policy themselves that gets passed at that larger level. Here in Illinois, we had the Fair Tax Initiative, which a lot of comrades did really great work on trying to get the vote out, and inevitably lost because I think we're going to see like progressive ballot measures or progressive candidates that are still in the hands of like billionaires and billionaire politicians, like J.B. Pritzker was here. That is not how we're going to win those progressive measures by and large. So it's this rethinking of how much electoralism we do, labor work we do, community organizing that we do, with education being a large center of a lot of that. So yeah.
Just to follow up on that with education, you said. Could you talk a little bit about the Socialist Night School you mentioned? Just tell people what that is and how you've been working to educate people.
Yeah, so Socialist Night School is a bit of a misnomer. It's not always at night. There we go. That's pretty much it. But it is theory, a bit of theory, a bit of history, a bit of philosophy. All of these different things outside of an academic setting, because it is, explicitly for radicalizing. It is explicit in its radicalization terms. So reading Marx, reading authors like Keeanga Yamada Taylor, reading, there's so many, I'm going to forget a bunch of them, but create this leftist philosophy, leftist theory to really, I think, and what I think is like really help you separate yourself, take yourself out of the everyday life, and be able to use the theory to kind of examine that which you are experiencing, that which you see. I always liken it to this great quote that I heard the other day, like Marxists and MBAs know the exact same thing. The latter just thinks it's good. So having this kind of theory to really beyond morality, these are all kind of moral fights, in my opinion. And I think a lot of people would agree. This is the right thing to do, is to destroy capitalism. It's, the right thing to do to stop these things. Now we're trying to kind of observe what is actually happening and maybe what to do moving forward.
Yeah, there was a great piece in Zac Gavin the other day making the point that in order for the socialist left to grow and thrive, that it needs to be rooted, like you said earlier in the podcast, in a working class, working people and not in intellectualism. However, I think it would be a missed opportunity to not also take the time, because it's not like working people are incapable of understanding Marx, right? They just need the time and resources to have it taught to them, like anybody that went to an academic university had any of these economic policies explained to them. I just wondered how you think merging, where you think learning theory and merging that with, modern activism, just what's the reaction been like that, I guess, and do you think it's going to be effective moving forward?
Yeah, I think there's an interesting point I want to that you said too. It's like, I to be honest, I come from the world of academia. I've like spent a lot of my time in academia, and it sucked. It's just not like the path that I want to take, because I realized actually a lot of those ideas are not taught in academia. Like, I didn't understand. I hear these theories, I hear these concepts, I heard them all over the place, but they didn't get defined to me until I got to socialist night school, until I started doing more radicalization, like radical education. So, that's just a bunch of bullshit. Like the timing thing, the respect of like people's time and understanding what it's like to, take that up. I can appreciate that tenfold like that. Yes, that has to be done sensitively. And we try to do it as best as possible to make it manageable for people. We try to, because we know how much capitalism can take away the time of people and rip them apart from doing the things that are actually important to making their lives better. But the second part of what you were saying, like what we've been kind of seeing, I think it's been good. I honestly think it's been good. I think it's very easy, and we kind of saw it like progressive. The term progressive used to really mean something. The term like being a progressive was like, wow, don't totally throw that out just yet. That was not in the mainstream political like vocabulary. But as we've gone moving forward, we're starting to see that these phrases, you can't just say them. They have to be backed up with something. They have to be backed up with a distinct break from what has come before, not just a redirection of which way things are flowing. It has to be an abrupt analysis. It has to be a very intentional surveying of the land. So even, I throw it around sometimes, but like even saying socialism can sometimes be like not the most exact term that should be like thrown around. Like that's just getting in the nitty gritty of it. That's just like the nitpicky of it. But sometimes having those debates, having those political discussions really does influence the direction of which the organizing can go. It has to be, it's slow, it's time consuming, but it helps it ultimately in the long run for sure.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And we've talked a little bit about, the lack of education when it comes to these concepts. And also you've talked about, how we need to pretty much dismantle capitalism. And I wanted to just ask, again, if anyone's watching that maybe isn't quite up to speed, how exactly does that translate into policy for you guys and the legislative goals that you're hoping to achieve? Obviously, we've heard a lot of, talk about pushing the Biden administration left and pushing these, kind of more corporate establishment neoliberals to the left. But what would that actually look like, in a city level in Chicago, or also on a national level, as far as what would be ideal? Just what kind of legislation would that kind of sentiments translate into for your community? Chicago is obviously facing a lot of gentrification, a lot of problems for lots of communities that are marginalized. So, can you just give people maybe an idea of what you would start with legislatively?
The legislation piece is interesting because, it's not going to be done with the intention of like kindness. It's not going to be done with the intention of like bridging a gap and bridging, reaching across the aisle. It's going to have to be pushed through relentlessly and ruthlessly, if that's the path, that I think a lot of us are seeing ourselves go down. But like we were talking before about like the progressive tax, the fair tax that was supposed to be passed here. And like Illinois has a flat tax that everybody gets taxed at the same rate. It fucks over poor people. Could I swear on this? Sorry.
You can say whatever the fuck you want to, man.
Oh yeah. Flat taxes fuck over poor people awfully. It's horrendous. And we were, it was an attempt, it was a step forward to this disruption of like ruthless capital and an untaxed like capital that a lot of Illinois politicians have here, Illinois businessmen, wealthy people have here. And then another thing too is like there is a ban on rent control in the state of Illinois. There is a Lift the Ban coalition that is working really hard to get the ban on rent control lifted and eliminated so we can instate rent control because people are getting gouged. And we have seen the pandemic has not been kind.
Yeah.
To well.
I wanted to pause you on that right there. I mean, obviously Chicago is demonstrative of the rise in rent, skyrocketing rent prices that have been seen coastally. Probably the hardest Midwestern city hit, or at least among them, as far as, skyrocketing rents. Governor Pritzker extended the statewide eviction moratorium until the 14th. But again, the deadline's fast approaching. And I'm just wondering if you could, talk about why postponing evictions with a moratorium is not a solution, and then maybe what a potential solution would be for Chicago renters who are, with their heads underwater right now, like so many areas.
Yeah, I mean, we've just seen this pushback of the moratorium. Like every month or every month and a half, we're just like, oh, we got it extended. Oh, we got it extended. I mean, that creates an insane amount of anxiety among the people to think that like maybe they're jobless, maybe, and then they have to risk houselessness too. Like it's just going to be an endless stream of anxiety and not knowing where your roof is going to be, or if you're going to have a roof over your head or something like that. But then also, we saw there was a report that came out today, and I'm not going to be able to cite it properly, but that like houselessness increased like over the past since Corona started, like 2%. Like it's already like spiking and going up in places. And it's just, it's clearly Illinois housing lobbyists just holding this hostage, holding the rent control policies or anything like that hostage, and they're paying their share of making sure that rent control is not enacted and rent control is not a reality. I don't know if that's the best answer, but it seems to be like there is no immediate desire by the elected officials to change that anytime soon. So, yeah.
Yeah, and just to kind of I guess stay on the topic of Chicago politics, but a little bit broadly. Earlier today, I saw AOC alluded that Rahm Emanuel had been floated as a potential part of either Biden's transition team or Biden's cabinet, God forbid. Rahm Emanuel, for any listeners who aren't familiar with Chicago politics, I mean, he's a disgraced Chicago politician, former mayor, current shitbag. As a Chicagoan, what's your reaction to Joe Biden being interested in working with somebody like Rahm Emanuel, who's been disgraced in the past in countless ways?
I think it just proves that you can't work with these fucking animals. You can't work with these democratic fucking pieces of shit. And anybody who wants you to be nice to them is trying to kill you. And I'm speaking very big there, but it's fucking murderous, the kind of shit that he did and the disgusting path that he leaves in his wake. And it just shows that, if the work wants to be done of pulling him to the left, if that is the work that people want to dedicate their lives to over the next 4 years, it's going to be a huge either uphill or just straight up losing battle. With the kind of people that he's surrounding himself with, the kind of people that even he kind of released his coronavirus plan and his COVID plan. There's nothing in there about there's nothing in there about sending out another check and helping people where they really fucking need it. So to get back to the Rahm point though, he's an idiot. He's a fucking dumb person, an awful politician. I don't understand what the appeal of him would be whenever. Like, sorry, your finger got sliced off at an Arby's, you fucking moron. Like, fuck yourself. And he just fucked over poor black and brown people in this city for a very long time.
Covered for the cops at every fucking opportunity.
Just like take a moment to step back from that, right? Like, you have the greatest showing of American like people power in 60 years, something like that. Massive turnouts, these uprisings over the summer, all about police brutality, all about police violence. And who are the two people that you're going to put on your team is Kamala Harris and Rahm Emanuel, the two most disgusting like cops and cop friends ever. And it makes no earthly sense. It might be a winning model. That's the most frustrating part. It might be okay because they have these friendships with the Obama years, or they have these ties back to the Clinton years, or Kamala, somehow glided through on this progressive policy or this progressive
pretending to be pro Medicare for all when she had her spotlight, and then immediately getting out of the way for Joe Biden.
Yeah. So it's fucking lies. I see it no different than how Trump can say something fucking absurd, and then we're all like, is that true? We wait 3 days to hear it be rebuked or something. It's just it's exactly the same. And I don't want to say it's just a politician thing, because there are some decent ones, I will admit to, but it is definitely a play of traditional establishment for sure.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Gavin.
Okay, I was just going to say that, I totally agree with that. And you're absolutely right about who Biden is surrounding himself with. I mean, personally, that's why I didn't end up voting for him, just because I knew that exactly who he would surround himself with, and, the laborious, task at hand of pushing him left. And that's another question I kind of wanted to ask you. We talked a little bit about AOC and your opinions on, pushing Biden left and all that. AOC is obviously one of the most prominent, socialists in the country. She was a DSA member, obviously. What was your opinion on that strategy, of kind of just waiting until Biden is already in power and now we start, calling him out? Because in my opinion, that's a little bit backwards. If you're going to use your leverage in any serious way, it would be before he's elected. Now that he's already elected on his, coalition of suburban wine moms and boomers, I just don't see how,
Colin Powell, John Kasich.
Yeah, John Kasich and all these Claire McCaskill's out on TV telling the left to, go home and all. It just seems a little bit, like I said, backwards.
Yeah, I mean, it's to throw a term in there, it's the classic Harringtonite model of the DSA. Just to kind of give some context, the DSA was created back in the late 70s, 80s with the intention of being an outside organization that pushed the Democratic Party to the left. This was Michael Harrington's intention. He kind of modeled it off of what was happening in European countries as well, that other European countries have leftist organizations that push parties to the left. That's kind of the hope. That is what the DSA was born out of. I'm not saying that's where the DSA is completely now. That is not what is the norm in a lot of ways. Some parts, yes, but other parts, no. So that's kind of a classic Harringtonite model approach. And I can't speak to why she did it. I can't, I don't know what would have compelled her to say that, because I am of the opinion that the Democratic Party did not win this race. The Democratic Party did not win this election. It was all the work that a bunch of outside groups did to help the Democratic Party. It was a bunch of fucking work that Rashida Tlaib, groups in Georgia that were working with Stacey Abrams, AOC, Ilhan Omar, all of those grassroots leftist, more left than liberal, more left than the party organizations helped them win this race more than the actual party did themselves, because the party's idea was it is still to give the conservative voices a lot more airtime at the DNC.
I think this is 100% evidenced by what we saw go down in Florida, right? I mean, while the Democratic Party is talking about how, trying to offshore blame into progressives and, Latino voters in Florida for their own shortcomings and their inability to message, you look at a progressive policy measure, Fight for 15, something that's been taken up by just about every, like you said, left of liberal organization, something that they've been fighting for, pro-worker, something that Biden himself even sort of acquiesced on and got behind, at least on paper. He refused to, actually speak about it. He refused to market this element of his campaign and this promise to voters. And instead, he lost the state when the ballot measure to bring the minimum wage up to $15 an hour passed overwhelmingly at 60%. So I think this just represents 100% what you're saying, that it's a the messaging failure. It's an inability to strategize and just play this game correctly. Because if they would have listened more to the progressive left and the people who were able to actually hand them this election by the thin margin that they got it, they could have won far more handedly. And I just wanted to get your take on something that Gavin and I have been talking about at length throughout the election cycle, but even now after a really dismal performance in the Senate and in the House for the Democrats. is the need for more, direct ballot initiatives and this, need to give the people control through direct democracy. Do you think that's the way that we need to, as a left, move forward and prioritize over electoral politics? The quote from Angela Davis comes to mind. Electoral politics is a liberal panacea, right? Our elected officials are always going to, kind of give us half measures and failures. Do you think that the best way forward is through ballot initiatives, or do you think we'll have better luck with, putting our chips in, a candidate sort of like the left did with Bernie Sanders?
That's interesting that you bring up that Angela Davis quote after she endorsed Biden during this election.
That was
it's
kind of like Noam Chomsky. I'm like, there's so much great work that they've done. You just kind of
I mean, what do they care anymore? They've sold their books. They've made their money. They're doing okay. I'll be a little bit cynical on that, but I also still have a lot of respect for Angela Davis. But yeah, I mean, we don't even live in a real fucking democracy. We don't live in a real functioning democracy. We live in a hyper bourgeois democracy that, I mean, I'm sick of having this conversation because it's so like played out. But the fucking Electoral College makes it's so boring to talk about it because it keeps fucking happening that we have to worry about it. It makes no earthly fucking sense. Even when the person that we're kind of glad won, it's still this. It's just gross. It
allows them to carry on the charade of their horseshit neoliberal politics.
Yeah. It's the weakest form of democracy that we are owed, that we deserve, and that we could function within. And it's just something that it's so weird. It's funny to think about, like, what is the reformist work, electoral work that leftists should be doing, focusing on. I think one good question is, like, should we be focusing on just changing the fundamental makeup of the country, of just changing the fundamental, like, if there was a massive push for legislation to pass to abolish the Electoral College, would that be a worthwhile thing for something like the DSA or leftist groups to take on and organize for and really push? Maybe, but then, you still have a lot of other things that you want to, like, take over and you want to push with it. But yeah, I mean, the other difficult question is, like, if you're going to organize within these communities, if you're going to, like, do this community action stuff, how much protection are you offering them that will make sure that these things aren't, like, hurt or taken away from them later on? Like, community organizing is really important. I believe it definitely serves its purpose. But if it can be, like, really challenged or really taken away without some legislative or some, like, power behind it, you got to think a little bit more forward on that. That requires, I think, a little bit more forward thinking. So, having people in office like Cori Bush and AOC and Tlaib and Ilhan and Jabari Brisport, like, all those people, like, they're good to have there. It's good that they're there. So.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. One more thing I just wanted to ask you was, you're from Chicago, obviously, and you have the Midwest Socialist Podcast, which you host. And obviously, Zac and I are based in Kansas City, Missouri, so also the Midwest. I just wanted to, hear if you had any good, tips or pros or cons or whatever of when it comes to, convincing people or talking to people about socialism in the Midwest. What kind of reactions you're getting, just what the general response is, anything you would suggest avoiding as far as, language, stuff like that. I just think it's important to continue educating people, especially in parts of the country that might not, be getting the same influx of, socialist or, far left values maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it is a question of, like, what are you fucking owed? What do you deserve and what is being taken from you? I think the right-wing voices in this country have shown a really good job of saying that the only people taking from you is the government. The only person infringing upon your liberty or whatever is the government, and our job is, or the immigrants. Yeah, there's a lot of fracturing language that is thrown in there, but it's never the capitalists, it's never the corporatists, it's never corporations, it's never billionaires, it's the government. And so we as leftists, as socialists, and myself as a Marxist, this idea that you have a right to what you create, you have a right to the wealth that you create, and it is stolen from you day in and day out, in so many ways. And that's just economically. We're not even talking about, socially, what that does to the breakdowns of these communities, and how, one Walmart comes in. I have family that lives in Iowa, and these small towns in Iowa, I used to know, thriving Main Street, thriving small businesses. You had somewhere to go. One Walmart comes in, decimates the town. 30 years later, the Walmart closes. The town is a husk of itself, its former self. And what does that do to the makeup of just how people relate to each other, where they live? So, I mean, it's my opinion that, I can't walk in with a hammer and sickle. I can't walk in with this big, I can't walk in with that. It's not always, in my opinion, the best way to do it. But people aren't dumb. People understand, these are not such obscene concepts that they've never worked anywhere before. But part of, I think, revolution is changing how people frame the world around them and think about how they interact with the world around them. So we're practicing radical humanism here. That's really what we're practicing.
Speaking of changing how people think, we talked about abolishing the Electoral College as kind of a necessity and honestly a no-brainer, that it's honestly a little bit, like you said, boring to discuss at this point. One thing that I think is a little bit more relevant now that we have Amy Coney Barrett on the bench, you have the 6-3 Supreme Court bench. I'm wondering what your take is on this. It's kind of a discussion that we've been airing out on the podcast, the best solutions from a leftist perspective on how to basically prevent the Justice Department from undermining democracy and letting the Supreme Court undermine the will of the people. Do you think that there's a benefit to the strategy of, stacking the Supreme Court, or do you think it's going to be more effective to kind of go a different approach and essentially eradicate the ability for the Supreme Court to perform judicial review at all?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because this is the other shitty part of our American system and policies that affect everyone, is that you were talking about direct democracy earlier. We want to talk about the least democratic
lifetime
body
appointments
in our government that we're told is necessary. Yeah, lifetime appointments. We don't have any say over who gets on them. It is hyper political. It has never been apolitical or whatever. I think the first thing we think about whenever a new justice is appointed is what party they are, is what their political. It's never been this nebulous thing, and the body itself has always been a political body. Like, having a Republican Supreme Court makes the Supreme Court inherently political. Like, that is not just by mistake. So, this is where I get tied up with thinking that's where electoralism works, because that's the only path we have towards impacting these things. Hopefully you can elect a progressive, a leftist congressperson, something like that. But it's going to take a radical rethinking of what it actually means. And I think we're okay at it. We're really not that good at it, but that the voice of the people doesn't only happen in the voting booth. The voice of the people has to happen in every waking moment of these disgusting people's lives, and these gross reactionary politicians' lives. And someone as harmful as Coney Barrett will be, you can't let them live comfortably. So,
one more question from me. With the results of the election, sort of settling in, it appears, unless there's a miracle in Georgia and the Democrats win the Senate race in the runoff and in the regular election, it'll be a Republican-controlled, Republican majority Senate. In my view, I think it's pretty obvious that Biden is going to use this as a justification for the impotence of the Democratic Party to act when, the need is most dire. But I just wanted to get your perspective on whether or not you think there will be another round of stimulus money coming. Obviously, you alluded his, coronavirus plans haven't revealed that will be the case, though sort of dangled like a carrot on a stick. for the past couple of months for people who are desperate for, relief. So I guess if I could just ask you, one, are you expecting or anticipating any sort of relief for Americans who desperately need it? And then what would be the ramifications for people in your city and in your area if that doesn't come to fruition?
No, I don't expect anything to come down the pipeline. He shows no signs of like working to the left of the aisle with something like that, which is super unfortunate. It's this classic American liberalism of like, Americans want opportunity. They don't want like guaranteed safety. It's very it's a lot of fuckery. And we fail to show that like actual material comfort opens more doors to opportunity, but we only work in that increment, not massive enough. But if we don't get it, I mean, we're going to see more and more people suffering. We're going to see, these fights are going to happen at the more localized level, state, county, city, whatever. Like I personally, I've been denied unemployment twice during these past 7 months, and it sucked. And I've gotten like I've gotten no help, not even little help. I've gotten no help from any state employee or anything like that because they're super overwhelmed. That's one thing. But also there is no investment in making sure that everybody that has been racked by this coronavirus and unemployment gets the help that they need. There is no safety net. Then the one that there is works super hard at dismantling it and making sure it's, really rickety and ripped apart. So I guess from personal experience, like, people are going to be moving back in with their parents. That's going to be a massive thing among young people. I think I'm going to see that a lot more. I had to do that for a little bit.
Yeah, I saw a statistic on, I think I was listening to like maybe Richard Wolff, but he said it was the highest percentage of people between the age group of 18 to 28 now live with their parents since the Great Depression. And I believe it's like something like 36%.
Yeah.
That's a lot of the country.
That's not that weird in a lot of other cultures, but in an American culture that like prides itself on like independence and like,
get the fuck out of the house. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that, like that's a big thing in American culture. We can't even live up to that. We can't even half promise that. But no, poor people are going to suffer even more. And I wonder, I really don't know. I don't know if people are going to leave Chicago. I don't know if they're going to, it's going to take a lot more organizing to make sure that their homes don't get taken away from them, because that's going to be a massive thing. It's going to take a lot more organizing. Here on the South Side, we've been doing mutual aid work days and giveaway days, like item giveaway days. We've done a couple of those and helping people like getting laundry detergent and toothpaste and fucking like shampoo. Like that makes a world of difference for people, and people come out because they need it, because it's fucking necessary. And that direct action is great. And that direct action is super helpful. But is it sustainable for an org like us to do on our own as powerful, as much as we're growing? No, the state owes you this. The government you are owed this. It's not just, it sucks that you have to demand it, but you're owed it. So you have to do that fight in the process. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we think the work you're doing at the Chicago DSA and obviously at DSAs across the country is just so massively, invaluably important, especially during these times, as you mentioned, with the unprecedented economic crisis, with people, failing to, even be provided the basic essentials. We just thank you so much for not only the work you're doing there, but also for joining us on the podcast today. I wanted to ask what people can do if they're listening to, support their local DSA chapter, what you would recommend doing to get involved or to help the Chicago DSA if they're in the area.
Yeah. I mean, right now we're going to be revamping a lot of the organizing work that we're doing. But if you're in Chicago, I mean, join the DSA and help us grow, help us be better, help us improve, help us do a lot of the work that we're doing with these working class communities and these working class among the working class. Everybody is in the working class for the most part, unless you're a bougie fuck. This is a fight that affects us all, and this is a reality that affects us all. So join the Southside branch is going to be doing a lot more mutual aid work. So donating to like the Southside DSA, we're going to figure out how to do that at the chapter level and kind of like make it better for everybody in the chapter, and just join, come on out, learn a little bit, try some socialism.
Hell yeah. And for anyone that's listening that maybe wants to check out some more of your work, your own podcast, is that where they can find it over here at the MidwestSocialist.com?
Or on Spotify. We're on the Midwest Socialist Podcast is on Spotify right now.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, man. We really appreciated your time today. It was great chatting with you.
It was great chatting with you guys. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Look forward to talking to you again soon in the future, hopefully.
Appreciate it. Yeah, definitely.
Take care, man.